1 in 5 women who develop breast cancer will die of breast cancer.
I had a short window of time to get my life together.
Cancer is a frustrating disease because there's never a 100% cure rate.
The worst case would be that they were not successful and that this would claim their life.
You feel a lot of pressure to make a lot of decisions in a short amount of time, and that's really scary.
I think that if Rebecca had not embarked on this spiritual journey, that probably would have been the end of the story.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. For thousands of years, physicians and scientists have acknowledged that the mind, body, and spirit have a combined effect on a person's health. It's believed, for example, that some diseases, even cancers, can be caused by hormones released by stress. When Rebecca Hamm discovered that something deadly had entered her body, she had to dig through decades of buried memories before any healing could begin.
I've been riding horses ever since I was young. In fact, it's kind of like a place I like to go to if I can ever get away and ride. It's a very peaceful place for me to ride horses. Both my parents worked, which was really unusual. Most of my friends' mothers never worked, so nobody was ever home. One day, this little girl showed up who lived around the corner from us, and she rode horses. And so I started riding horses in Las Vegas, just being free and feeling like I was connected to something and something was connected to me. And when you ride with them, especially bareback like I did when I was young, there's something that just opened in my heart that was really deep. And looking back on it, it was probably the saving grace of my life, just being so lonely. I was alone when I found out that I had cancer. All this loneliness came back like really full force. I sat down in my car and I'll never forget it. It was so beautiful outside and it was quiet. It was a cool morning and my first thought was, God, who do I call? I sat there for probably a good 5 minutes quietly in that car that day and just thought about who I was going to call first. And I thought about how I was going to say it and I was prepared about their reaction. But I ended up calling my mom first.
She was a chubby little curly, blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby. Precious, absolutely precious.
About a year or so after I was born, we moved to Las Vegas because my dad worked at the Nevada test site. I think it was hard because it was a 24-hour town, so it seemed like nothing ever shut down.
Growing up in the 1960s, Rebecca's early years in Las Vegas were very active. She kept busy playing sports and riding horses.
She was very athletic.
I think I was very gifted as an athlete when I was young. I think I was just angry because I was so lonely. I channeled all that energy into sports, and so I ran track and played basketball and softball.
Life unfolded fairly normally for Rebecca. She got married, she remained active, she traveled, and then finally settled in Los Angeles. After returning from a trip to Europe with her then husband, she noticed something didn't feel right inside.
I started having pain like in the area what would be considered like a herniation. Been to several doctors in LA and they kept telling me nothing was wrong, but I kept having this pain and finally went to see an OBGYN who said, well, it's not a herniation, it's not this, it's not that, but you do have a couple of small cysts on your ovaries. He said, just go home, it's not a big deal. Well, a year later is when I moved to Austin, and within that year I was really sick. I had colds and flus every other month. I was eating, within those 2 years, 6 or 7 times a day and still losing weight.
She was very concerned that she couldn't put on weight. She was really concerned that she was having a lot of heat in her body. She wasn't able to sleep at night. She wasn't able to do a lot of things that she wanted to do. She was fatigued.
The symptoms continued for 3 years. Doctors were perplexed. Some speculated that Rebecca had a rare autoimmune disorder, in addition to her skin problems.
My initial reaching out was to traditional medicine because that's It's all I had access here to until I started meeting the right people who started putting alternative complementary medicine healers in my life here.
That's one of the things that I really loved about Rebecca, is that she was willing to explore things beyond what doctors told her, even when she didn't know what was going on.
I started working with a woman here, Karen, who does Chinese medicine. She, just a lot of different healing, and started getting on a protocol that started healing my body.
The treatment first called for Rebecca to try some powerful Chinese herbs. She began with a plant species called Artemisia. The protocol seemed to work. Her success with herbs convinced Rebecca to try acupuncture and improve her diet. With these new modalities, she felt better in 2 weeks than she had in 2 years. Improvement continued for several months.
There was a period where I had a plateau. I was feeling okay, but not feeling great. And I just kept going through the motions and really not facing, I think, the bigger picture, and that was my life.
A colleague of Rebecca's recommended that she make an appointment to see Dr. Laird, a medical doctor and Sufi healer. The Sufi tradition emerged from the Middle East in the 8th century and encompasses a diverse range of practices associated with Islamic beliefs.
I had chills on my body because I just knew, oh my God, my life was going to change drastically. And of course I called him, I went and saw him, and the first thing he said to me, he goes, "You need to go to a healing intensive."
Rebecca took the advice of Dr. Laird and traveled to Northern California to seek guidance from Dr. Robert Jaffe, a trained medical doctor, now a Sufi master healer.
In the healing intensive, usually what we have is a group of maybe 10 people that come in. And they're in a room, and we have the person sit, we call it in the hot seat. And the first thing that I saw with her was the incredible sincerity. And the key to transformation is sincerity. And Rebecca had it. When I saw that in her, I knew she could heal this.
Dr. Jaffe felt there were several emotional issues affecting Rebecca's health. Primarily, there seemed to be a deep-seated anger that she had been suppressing for a long time.
On the last day of the healing intensive, he looked at me, and he has an eye about him. He looked at me right in the eye and he said, "You're ready." He said, he goes, "You ought to take the promise, you're ready." And I didn't at the time understand it, but I knew what he meant. And that was really to just be more open to God, to accept my calling. And I said, "Well, let me think about it." So I went home, and this was in July of 2001, I guess. And by November, I had cancer.
Dr. Jaffe concluded that there were some serious emotional problems affecting Rebecca's health. She believed him, but she had no idea how these unresolved emotions, some buried since she was a little girl, would come back to haunt her.
One night, my roommate, Fran, was home, and I said, "Hey, do you want to go work out?" So we went and worked out. When I got back, my shoulders felt sore, my chest felt sore.
We had done an upper body workout that day, so it wasn't unusual that she was sore. And I remember her just kind of punching around in her chest, and she said, "Wow, there's something in my breast."
I thought, wow, this is wild. I thought maybe I broke a blood vessel or irritated a lymph node. Never in my wildest dreams did I think it was cancer.
I think the gravity of what was happening with Rebecca really hit her the day that she had the biopsy.
That first 24 hours was kind of a fog because you hear it, but you don't really hear it. I think the overwhelming feeling was, I just was relieved. I know it sounds crazy, but I think I just didn't have to fight anymore. This cancer diagnosis, it was like the catalyst for me to face all my fears. And there was a deep sense of relief in that. The terror came because I didn't know how my family was going to react and how my loved ones were going to react.
And everybody goes through the same thing, this horrible fear, the denial that it could possibly be true.
I could tell she was calm about it, but I could feel her energy underneath was really frightened by it.
Rebecca had just gone through a long process for an extensive period of gastrointestinal distress, and so I think that because she had gone through that whole process, which was so frustrating, and was finally feeling better, it made the cancer diagnosis even more devastating.
It doesn't really sink in until you start having to go to all these doctors and all these appointments, and then that's when things get really out of control. I had to interview several surgeons and doctors. And I think because they're so used to seeing so much cancer, they treat you like you're just another person through the revolving door. I started making some phone calls to find a surgeon and oncologist, while at the same time I called Dr. Jaffe, who I had just met 5 months before at the healing intensive, and said, Dr. Jaffe, I just found out that I have breast cancer.
And she asked me what to do about that. What I saw was that she needed to have very intense herbal support.
So I had that information on one shelf, and while this was going on, I started making all the appropriate phone calls and appointments for the traditional doctors.
You're trapped in this, what the physician tells you, how he treats you, what procedures you'll have, and the medicines you're going to take.
There's always a rush, because there is a rush. When you have cancer, they don't know how aggressive of a cancer it is, so you feel a lot of pressure to make a lot of decisions in a short amount of time, and that's really scary.
Dr. Doty was recommended to Rebecca as an oncologist, as a person for her care.
Rebecca came to me with a lesion in her breast, seeking advice as to how her tumor should be treated. And we went through the various treatment options and discussed the rationale for them. Fortunately, her tumor was small, and there was no evidence of spread at the time of presentation, so fortunately she had a good prognosis.
The surgery was not the most critical thing. It was what treatment I was going to do is the bigger decision for me. Do I go with this alternative and complementary medicine, or do I go with the chemo, the radiation, all that kind of stuff?
One of the first things she said to me basically was she wanted me to stay out of her decision of how she would be treated. And my immediate response was, absolutely, because it's your body. You have to make the decision. And I have to tell you, I was terrified that she would make it.
Rebecca didn't like doctors who assumed cancer would destroy her body. So she chose Dr. Doty, who would perform a less intrusive surgery that removed just the tumor and lymph nodes rather than performing a full mastectomy. But that didn't make it any less frightening.
Fortunately, things went well in the operating room. But like most cancer surgery patients, Rebecca now had to begin a radiation program to kill any remaining cancerous cells.
The mainstay of radiation therapy for cancer treatment is photon irradiation. Depending on the site that's treated, the side effects may be severe or very manageable.
The first time I went in to get radiation, it was really humiliating. You're in a room with sometimes 4 or 5 people. You're completely naked from the waist up, and everybody's looking at you, and they're putting tattoos on your breasts, and they're aligning stuff up. And I had to deal with all my fears and insecurities and about my breasts and about just everything, all in that one moment that first time. It was a lot of mixed emotions.
But Rebecca and her doctors pushed through with the treatments, which in addition to the chemotherapy included hormone and immune therapy. The toxic effects of those treatments seemed worse to Rebecca than the actual disease. She started looking for some type of alternative to help her cope. Dr. Jaffe recommended Dr. Chi, a Chinese herbal master in Southern California.
And Dr. Chi informed her that her immune system was basically shot and that she should do herbal support and not do any type of chemotherapy.
Rebecca trusted Dr. Chi enough to try his alternative program. Instead of prescribing synthetic hormone drugs, Dr. Chi used herbal counterparts.
If you tested positive when you had cancer, you're supposed to take the tamoxifen to help regulate the hormonal level. Well, Dr. Chi uses an herb called myomin. It's a natural way to balance the hormones, and so I did that herb for 6 months that he gave me. The other thing that impressed me about him is he said, well, how do you feel about cancer? Was one of the first things he ever asked me, and I said, well, I know I can beat it.
You have to believe you're going to get well. It's not just the alternative medicine by itself, it's really the person's beliefs and how strongly they believe.
I really believe she needed intervention. Sometimes I can do that intervention. I mean, I make the prayers that do that, but sometimes I feel it's important for them to meet the man that trained me. And in her case, that was what I felt. So I asked her to call City and to talk with him and to create a relationship with him so that he could do those prayers.
Residing in Jerusalem, Sidi is one of the most respected masters in the Sufi tradition. His teachings had a profound effect on Rebecca.
My information is that Sidi told her as well that she was too weak to do chemotherapy, and that he okayed radiation for her, but not to do the chemo, and instead asked her to do his cancer herbal formula, which she did.
One of the properties in it is black seed, and the oil of black seed is supposed to be one of the most healing oils in the world, and it comes from places like Yemen and different places. We don't have it here naturally in our country.
Rebecca was given other ingredients to complement the black seed oil, including the leaves from a prickly pear cactus. She took the formula every morning on an empty stomach. The treatment lasted 6 months.
In terms of the Western doctors, I think the first time they knew something was different was when I was on my 30th day of radiation, and my side effects were not strong at all. And I had shared that I was taking these herbs and this cancer formula. Dr. Doty, who is remarkable given that he's a very traditional Western doctor in oncology, he said, "Rebecca, whatever you're doing, it's working, so just keep doing it."
I think the days are long gone where the physician says, you do this, and the patient salutes and marches off to follow the doctor's orders.
They never balked at least the two of them. They never had anything negative to say, and I respect them very deeply about that.
As Rebecca faithfully treated her physical symptoms, Dr. Jaffe and Dr. Laird knew she still had to overcome her remaining emotional issues in order to truly get well.
I think for breast cancer, it's psychologically associated with female sexuality from a young age. In the reproductive years, many women associate the breast with maternity, nurturing, breastfeeding. And so coming to terms with having cancer in that organ can be a difficult thing.
It takes time to teach people the aspect of their being that is the spiritual, and that they have a soul, and that the soul needs to be nourished. And this soul has issues, and this soul has a need for medicine just like the other parts of the human being.
One of the first or second healings I had with Dr. Laird, he said, "Rebecca, bring the light of God into your cancer, into the tumor, and tell me what you see." I found myself getting really frustrated, and why am I doing this, and what is this, like some Ouija board stuff? I'm just like, this is not working.
In Rebecca's case, her cancer had been holding some deep emotional pain that she'd been carrying since she was in 5th grade. And our work was to help her actually bring her awareness right directly into the cancer, if you will.
And I came down into a room as clear as day, and I was in my 5th grade class in the back row with all my girlfriends. And I looked over to my right in slow motion, and I noticed that all my girlfriends had breasts, or what I thought back then were breasts. And I thought in that moment, well, I don't, or I had this feeling if I didn't. And I turned back around, and in that moment, out loud on the phone, I said, "I'd rather die than have my shirt off." It leapt out of my mouth, and I couldn't even hold it back. And then I started crying. All this pain that I had when I was young all came to the surface. I didn't even know it was there, but it came from that healing.
More importantly, from our point of view, the constrictions and the pain that were held in this area released, and the structures that had held us in place began to wash, and the area began to return to what would be a healthier, more balanced state.
So then when I had to go to do radiation, it was like the first time that those two moments came crashing together. Like the very thing I had said when I was in 5th grade came right to fruition. Here I am with my shirt off, and I'm feeling like I'm going to die from breast cancer. It was a very powerful moment for me.
Rebecca's childhood loneliness and the poor self-image that hindered her in her early adolescence were both heavy issues for a girl who took everything to heart. Rebecca turned to her mother for help in sorting through them.
My mother, ironically, who's been an ICU nurse, has been in traditional medicine for 31 years, even though she's been in traditional medicine, she also has been, in her own way, a very spiritual person, has pursued spiritual paths. So she supported me 100%.
There was a point in time when Rebecca made her choices, and I agreed with her choices. For me, it was letting go of control over the situation. Regardless that I was a mother, regardless that I was an RN, regardless of the terror I had that she might make the wrong decision.
I know it was very frightening for her. I'm the only daughter, so I think it was scary for her to make all those trips to the doctors and to go down to the MD Anderson and to go through all the testing, which was really difficult. They do some pretty painful testing.
She healed very quickly compared to most people. First of all, a lot of it was just her deep sincerity. Secondly, the herbs that she was taking were really supporting her system and protected her.
Rebecca had a very forward-looking attitude. She enjoys life. She's vigorous and engaged. She sought out what she felt was best for her to do. She is cautious with what she eats and remains very active. And I'm sure that this had a significant impact on her prognosis.
She was really an advocate for her own health, and it was wonderful to work with someone who was so proactive. I just would encourage all patients to seek out information, to really consider their own general state of health and their own spiritual beliefs as they go through a treatment course.
When people recover spiritually, the physical body follows it. It's kind of like if you had a carburetor and you don't clear the sludge out of the carburetor, there's no way you're going to get the carburetor to work. Well, it's the same way. If you don't clear the spiritual issues, the body can't really respond.
I think my fear of my faith and my fear of having faith or returning to my faith was what led to the cancer, and this is why the cancer was a gift. I really twisted what being a vessel of God was all about, and that's what I learned deeply, was like it wasn't about me. I'm just the vessel, and it took the cancer and all the things I went through to learn that lesson, and that was pivotal.
If you asked Rebecca today about cancer, she would say how thankful she was for the disease. In the process of fighting it, she dealt with emotions that had haunted her throughout her life.